Welcome to the Stay Classy San Diego podcast. I'm your guest host, Steve Petersky, filling in for Steve Wire. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Max Lux Media and Barn Time. This podcast is a healthy discussion of all things North County, local politics, and regional issues that concern all residents. Today, our guests are Terry Gasolin, City Council member at Del Mar, and San Marcos Mayor Rebecca Jones. Ladies, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having us.
My pleasure.
So, just a quick bio. Terry was reelected to Del Mar City Council for a second term this year and will now serve as mayor in 2025 as Del Mar has a rotating mayor. She's been on SANDAG board member for 2 years, and that's what this podcast is going to be discussing is a lot of the SANDAG regional transportation issues and plans. She's also a professor of computational biology and genomics at the University of California, San Diego. She is the chair of bioinformatics and Systems Biology Graduate Program, an undergraduate advisor to Undergraduate Bioinformatics Council of UCSD majors in bioinformatics. That's a mouthful.
Yeah, you get an A for that one.
Some of her many accomplishments in office also include minimizing SANDAG's bluff stabilization project to stop decapitation of the bluff and assured SANDAG funding for new legal railroad crossing and safe passage to the beach. Our other guest is Mayor Rebecca Jones, who's also reelected to her second term as mayor in November and has served on the San Marcos City Council for 16 years. She represents San Marcos on the SANDAG Board of Directors. She also co-owned her own small business in furniture marketing for over 20 years. In her spare time, she hosts the inspirational The CEO Lead in podcast that highlights women in leadership and their journeys that led them to their careers. And some of her accomplishments with San Marcos is one of the city is now enjoying its lowest crime rate in the city's history, new parks, improved infrastructure, a balanced budget, and the highest percentage of affordable housing in the county. Ladies, today obviously we'll be talking about San Diego Association of Governments and its regional transportation plan. And we've talked to both of you about this a bit over the last few years. And it's an interesting yet controversial plan. So first of all, I'd just like to kind of ask each of you, and we'll start with you, Terry, of what this plan will do for each of your cities. So for your city specifically. So, what do you see the good, the bad, and just kind of highlight some of the things that you think this plan will do?
Well, Del Mar was really torn about the RTP, whether to vote yes or whether to vote no. We had a long discussion in our council meeting about it. What were the topics? The main reason to vote for it is front and center is relocating the railroad tracks off the bluff in Del Mar. We have a mile of crumbling coastal bluff with irrigation water and groundwater flowing under the tracks and out to the sea. And it is slowly eroding those tracks. So this plan does include relocating that.
Right.
However, a plan makes money move. And we now have $300 million from the state that's getting this ball rolling. So that changes a little bit the value to Del Mar of needing to have the relocation funded within this plan. There may be other ways to fund. That's the key. There are elements of this plan that were contentious. Vehicle miles traveled tax and road usage charges. Those were a real problem for us. And what's missing? Improved bus service. There's no bus that goes east to the high schools that Del Mar's kids go to. Nothing. That's an example.
Gotcha. And Rebecca, for San Marcos, you're the inland city, so you don't have the coastal issues that a Del Mar or Encinitas would have. But from your perspective, what do you see from the plan? What do you like? What don't you like?
Well, to be honest, there's not too much that I like because it's not a balanced transportation plan. If you look at San Marcos, we're about 25 square miles, and we don't have a way that people can just, walk around and jump on a train to go where they need to go. A lot of our folks, need to get there. We have a lot of families in San Marcos. So a lot of people need to get their kids to school, to their after-school activities. And we, too, don't have a way to get our kids to school. I believe that'll be microtransit. So The couple of things that I do like about the plan would be the micro transit part of it, and then also the technology. I do believe that technology is the future of transportation, but it is not going to be fixed rail. And so there's a lot of that in the plan that I don't think really makes any sense. And so I have an issue with that. And, again, it doesn't serve all of the county, and it really leaves North County, I think, in a very vulnerable position of not being able to address the needs of our residents. And if you look at my city specifically, I have almost 40,000 students that are coming in every single day to CSU, San Marcos, Palomar College, and then all the rest of my higher learning institutions. How do I move them around? It certainly is not going to be via train. It just doesn't work. It's going to be micro transit. So for my city to move people within my city, micro transit will be where it's at. But as far as getting them to work outside of the city, it's not going to honestly be by a train. It could be by bus or some other technology that I think is coming in the future.
Gotcha. And just for our viewers and our listeners, the SANDAG is a regional transportation and planning, metropolitan planning organization, council of governments, and individuals like yourselves make decisions on these grandiose plans. And it also comes with about a $1 billion budget a year, per year. But another thing in the RTP, when we'll get to in a little bit, but just some points, the plan also calls for a number of tax increases. So 3 total. That's 2 for county residents, 1 that includes just San Diego, the city of San Diego residents. Has the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions by 19%, at least I believe. I thought I read something that number may have changed, but I'm not 100% sure. And you guys could correct me as we get into this a little bit later. And then the cost is going to cost. The estimates are at 172 billion right now. Some are still reporting 160 billion to my chagrin, but I'll let that slide for right now. And so another thing is that a big source of contention or confusion may be around the funding. So we'll start with that one. Like we said, $172 billion. Talked to both of you plenty about it. Is that attainable? With how everything is allocated, and there have been some board decisions too that have taken out some of the funding. Passenger fares from NCT and MTS. That's billions of dollars. The tax initiative didn't pass yet. The special interest coalition's coming back next year to try to get that on the ballot again. And then the toll roads from South Bay Expressway, I believe it's called. So it seems like we're already short. And so, Rebecca, let's start with you on this one. Your thoughts on the funding. I know there's a lot to chew on that one, but I'd just like to get your thoughts on the funding and kind of where do you see it coming from and how does its impacts?
So as you mentioned, I've been on my city council for over 16 years. I'm just finished, right around 16 years. I'm just finishing my 16th year. I've always had an ideology of you buy what you can afford. You don't spend money you don't have. And when I look at this plan, it's actually $269 billion a year of expenditure, which is huge. And 60% of that has to be paid by San Diego County residents. So when you think about that and you think about how much money that is, I have a real problem with that because you cannot, and when you start talking about free transit for a certain people, and some people are not going to be charged this and some people are not going to be charged that, we're not living within our means, and I have a problem with that. The sales taxes, we've already had an issue where we do have Transnet. All of the residents spoke and said, yes, I'm willing to tax myself and get these projects. Now we are saying, well, guess what? You don't get those projects, and now we want to tax you 2 more times. I think our credibility at SANDAG is terrible. Absolutely terrible. I'm actually embarrassed by some of the things that are said by some of the board members when they're talking about, we're doing right by the San Diego County residents. No, a lot of us are left out. And, when you look at North County as a whole, we have about 1/3 of the population of the county. And yet we are literally ignored time and time again. Many of us, and I am all for, I've lived in San Diego County since I was 6 months old. Many of us like to live in rural areas. We like to live a different lifestyle. And, that's the thing that's beautiful about our county. We have something for everyone. If you want to live in an urban environment, you can. If you want to live out and have horses out in Ramona and things like that, you can. But what our plan is too expensive, our plan that we have now, and it just doesn't serve everyone. And so those are really some of the problems that I have. But financially, it is a nightmare. And charging people to drive on roads, it will be a regressive tax, no matter how you look at it. And then also converting current roads and highways to toll roads now. I actually put forth a resolution prior to the regional plan being passed in the event that I wasn't reelected, that I could protect San Marcos residents. So what I did was said we are going to stand up for our residents, our businesses, and our visitors against any road fees within our city limits. So that would cover toll roads or anything of the like. I just don't agree with it. I think, our citizens expect that they're going to be able to drive. They expect that they're going to be able to get where they need to go. And this plan comes very, very short, falls short of doing that.
And Terry, your thoughts on the funding? We've had these discussions before. And what challenges do you see, or what things do you see are benefits as well within the funding?
Yeah. Well, everything that Mayor Jones said, and in your intro, you talked about my being a professor of genomics. Genomics is the analysis of data, looking for patterns in huge amounts of network data, really. And we have a transportation network in San Diego County. The planning fundamentally came from the bottom up, looking at every single person in San Diego as an entity that moves from point A to point B,
right,
and watching through cell phone data and through other types of data, where do people and vehicles move between? And what emerged from that was everywhere. People are going from north to south and east to west, and they're going in circles. There's more military traffic than anyone ever anticipated. That was military related.
Sure.
So these are people related to Miramar Base and so on. So there's a firm foundation of knowledge to be used to figure out, what do we really need? That was used to drive the notion of, where do we put public transportation to maximize the most people going from point A to point B? The problem with that is, in San Diego, very few people use public transportation because it doesn't take them where they need to go. 90% of the people moving around San Diego don't use public transportation. And you can look at example after example. The Blue Trolley line is this gorgeous new trolley that was put in, and the idea is connect UC San Diego to downtown, to UTC. People will use it, and the reality is, for anybody to use it, they either have to be within walking distance or they need to drive there and park.
Right.
And there are very few people within walking distance, and it's very difficult to drive there and park. We haven't solved the real problems. So here we have this huge, gigantic budget to build all this infrastructure that is not going to serve the real needs. We need to turn it inside out. We need to look at our priorities. The database, or the base foundation of data that we have, is wonderful. And I think we can build on it in very creative ways and lead transportation planning. But the projects and the costs of those projects are a list. It's a long list. And the need for each one has not been evaluated on a project-by-project basis. We need to step back and we need to think this through.
Yeah, I was going to follow up kind of with that. When you're looking at a plan like this that's so aggressive, and especially with the funding, it's almost a federal funding plan. 172 or 269 billion, however you want to look at it. Either way, those are massive numbers on the backs of 3.3 million people. But costs change. We see things, we had the pandemic, right? Things go up and down. Now we're staring at a recession in the face, right? We've had this inflation. There's been no kind of updates on the financials of each of these projects and where they're going to be. It just seems like more of a ballpark. So to me, it looks like we could be very well underestimating the actual true cost of the plan, which then what do you do? Is it another tax? Is it more, is it higher fees? And then how do you battle what the state may end up doing as well on this kind of stuff? So I just wanted to kind of get your brief thoughts on maybe on that side of things too.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to say just one thing to start with, and that is, the $169 billion plan, 168, 165, whatever you want to call that. That was in 2020 dollars. And when we actually approved the plan, which I voted no on it, that actually was in December of 2021. So if you just look at that, there was an escalation. I kept asking for it. I kept saying, this isn't today's dollars. That's where the $269 billion number came from. But even locally in our city, we've noticed huge construction changes. Everything is costing so much more. And, even finding the workforce is difficult. And now that the union-only projects essentially have been, also approved, you're looking at a smaller workforce in that in itself as well. And so, what are we doing? I think, I agree. We need to dial it back. We need to take another look at things. I think that there was such a, I don't know if this was intentional or not, but I think there was such a, we're going to give you everything at the last minute, and then you need to make a decision all of a sudden. And it's like, wait a minute. There were many of us, including myself, saying the whole time, I am not supporting a road user charge. I am not supporting a road user charge. And yet, at the end, there was a road user charge and ready to cram it down our throats. That is not how you make good policy decisions. That is not where you come up with a good plan. And AB 805, I'm going to talk about the elephant in the room. One of the biggest problems that we have at SANDAG is that we have a disproportionate amount of discussion happening at the board level. You've got San Diego, they're the big dog in the room. They don't care what happens in North County. They don't care what happens along the coast. They only care about what happens in San Diego proper. That is the least collaborative way that you can get anything done that is going to serve people. If you think for 1 second that residents from San Marcos don't work in San Diego, you're wrong. Of course they do. And so, what we've come up with is a plan that A, is far too expensive, B, does not serve all parts of the county, and C, is very San Diego centric. And AB 805 has really pushed, this plan forward, and it doesn't serve people. And I can tell you, when I was out on the campaign trail, people are mad. They don't want it. They don't want to be taxed on something they're not going to use. They don't want to be taxed on something that benefits only really San Diego proper. They want something that's going to help them too, and help them with their quality of life. People just want to live their lives and be happy and, get to where they need to go, get their kids to their extracurricular activities. For someone to say, oh yeah, you need to be on public transit to get there, it doesn't serve us. And so, places that are, like San Marcos and other cities that are more rural and don't have, everything that they need to get to within a close proximity. And by the way, San Marcos is extremely hilly. And I've even told many of the board members, hey, come and check out San Marcos. Our topography does not lend to people riding their bicycles. It just doesn't. I had someone say, well, an e-bike. And I'm like, come on. Let's be real here. Every city has its individual needs, and that discussion has come up a lot. Sure. We have our needs. We need a plan that actually works for our cities.
And Terry, to you.
Well, I'd like to pick up on a couple of things that Rebecca said. So the weighted vote on the SANDAG board, that's AB 805. Yeah. What does the weighted vote do? It means that Del Mar, which is one of the jurisdictions. Right. Yes, we have a small number of people in Del Mar, but we're highly interconnected to the city of San Diego, to the university, to Ramona. I love going to Anza Borrego and Ramona and all these places that just have this gorgeous topography. I discovered San Marcos recently. There's some great walking trails there. I love it. There are many places in San Diego I personally would much rather go than downtown.
Sure.
AB 805 gives the vote at the end of the day. If the city of San Diego and 2 other cities don't like the vote, they can call a weighted vote and basically veto what the entire rest of the board has said or done. So, I've made it my holiday learning to try to understand some of the other ways that other associations of governments work. One is that they don't directly control the entire $260 billion. They control the policy and the planning. And then on a project-by-project basis, they're funded through various mechanisms. It's more diffuse. And that leads to good planning. Because right now, one way to look at it all, it's a weighted vote with a money grab. And it's a money grab to build a central mobility hub in one place where you probably talk to the majority of people, at least in North County for sure, and they don't want to go to that central mobility hub. They really wish they didn't have to go to the airport along the roads that they need to. But you know what? They've got Irvine. There are other airports to get in and out of the area. And sometimes the airports in Irvine are closer and the connections are better. So this central mobility hub, the weighted vote, it's the same thing. It's putting the weight in one place, and it's off balance. I really like what Mayor Jones said at the beginning. It's not a balanced plan.
Now we'll move on a little bit. You guys have already mentioned it, the controversial road user charge. And before you go, just easy. Just to explain, people, it's a per mile fee that has been implemented through the California Air Resources Board, or they approved it. SANDAG board had obviously approved that. And then there's been talk of trying to remove it, although the staff hasn't done that. And they were given 6 months at the beginning of this year. They didn't do it. They've kicked the can now till spring of 2023. And what makes this RUC unique is it's the only one in the state, the only plan in the state that has a local RUC. The state RUC is coming regardless. So it's a double fee. And there's a lot of questions around the implementation, the deployment of this, tracking cars, giving your odometer to the DMV, other mechanisms like that. How do you know if someone's driven to Arizona, Nevada, Mexico, or out of the county? So there's a lot to be figured out, and it's troubling on some levels, but it's also been a source of controversy and fierce debate among the board. So I just wanted to kind of get your guys' a little bit more take on the RUC and what are these challenges with it? Because I mean, it seems like it's coming. Even in Biden's infrastructure plan, the federal government has said they're going to start studying and looking at this on a nationwide level. So that could be potentially 3 road user charges in San Diego County. So Terry, we'll start with you on that. And what is your position and how do you see the RUC?
First, let's take this apart and then put it back together again.
Okay, let's do it.
So taking it apart, we have a gas tax right now.
Sure.
There are some really good online calculators where you can put in the kind of car you have and calculate what's your current gas tax. If you have a manual transmission Audi that's 10 years old, making 24 miles per gallon on average, highway and city on average, you're paying a gas tax that's a road user charge of 3 cents per mile right now. And that's with the federal and the state.
Okay.
The road user charge in this plan would be on top of that. And that's
Correct.
Very important because that means that once the state and the federal figure out how do they convert the gas tax into a per mile charge that can help maintain our roads, because it has to happen somehow. And that's an open debate.
Sure.
But that money will have to flow. The roads have to be maintained. We need to do that.
They do, yes.
So do we use a road usage charge regionally on top of that for the people who live here to pay for all these roads? But it's not just the roads. The road usage charge is going to pay for the public transportation and all these very large projects. Again, there's no balance here because of who and how many are served. The road usage charge is kind of tax everyone to pay for very specific projects for the tiger in the room, the controller of the weighted vote.
Right. San Diego.
Yeah.
Rebecca?
Well, I want to start out by saying one of the things that I wanted to clarify is there are 18 cities plus the county, so there are 19 entities at SANDAG. So
Thank you.
when Terry had mentioned that there are three cities that would make a decision for all of us, that actually becomes a really important detail that needs to, for people to really understand. When you look at the local road user charge, I myself drive an electric vehicle. I'm fine with paying something. However, I'm not fine with a federal gas tax or fee, a local and a state. And in the funding plan, it actually shows that the local 3.3 cent road usage charge is not for the maintenance of roads or highways. It specifically says that it is for active transportation and then also for capital projects to build, right? Not maintenance or anything like that. So again, I always, when we have a lot of parks in my city, a lot of trails, I've got about 72 miles of trails. When we're putting in something new, I always look at, okay, we're adding something. We need to also remember that we've got ongoing maintenance with all of these bells and whistles. So what we've done is we've got this plan, and we found this very much in Transnet. Transit needs to be subsidized. Yes, we have to have it. There are some people that rely on it, but what we're doing to ourselves and what the plan that we've come up with is not really serving everyone. Again, it's too expensive. It just doesn't do what it needs to do. And then again, back to the city of San Diego. And, yes, Del Mar has only one weighted vote, I think it is. I have three. My city's almost 100,000 people. But like I said before, I've got almost 40,000 students coming into my city. Like I actually have needs and issues that most cities are not dealing with.
Sure.
And when you look at transportation, and what you're talking about is a per situation and project, that is very important. And I think if we look at what's happening with the city of San Diego and them just saying, and honestly, I can't recall if you were there, Terry, or not, but we had this one kumbaya sort of meeting. And one of the council members from San Diego said that he was actually pissed off that some of the cities wanted to have a voice in all of this because, and I said, well, you need our tax dollars. So, that's a problem. And, we all spend tax dollars all over the county. The truth is, we've got to have a totally different plan, in my opinion, that looks at the future and what technology is going to do, actually moving people where they need to go on a daily basis, because this plan is for commuters. It's not for people that are doing their day-to-day life. It's for commuters that are moving from one fixed point to another. And I would argue that most people are not that. You look at salespeople, you look at, I was talking to one gentleman in my city at the VFW one day, and he was saying to me, Rebecca, I have a small air conditioning business. I don't know where I'm going every day. I go wherever the need is. Whenever those calls come in, I go wherever that is. I might be going outside to Riverside County. I might go to Orange County. I might go all the way in East County and, further. And he said, I never know where I'm going to go. This road user charge would hurt my business very much. And again, it's not back to maintaining the actual roads. It's to actually paying for a transportation system that really leaves most of us out in the cold.
And you bring up a good point there. And I've talked to both of you about this a couple of times. And even, I believe it was the president of CARB, California Air Resources Board, on there's a lot of talk about equity and financial equity or economic equity or justice. Well, with all these implemented fees or planned to be implemented, how does that help your low-income people or even on the middle class? Does that prevent them from climbing the housing ladder or the job ladder? I mean, if you're not on these fixed rail lines or within that, you have to pay to go to an interview or something like that. Like you said, business, logistics, real estate, there's so many industries that rely on it. So right there, you're going to see an increase in cost of goods and services, I would imagine. So just kind of your guys' take, and Rebecca, if you want to just kick this one off,
Yeah.
and even the woman from CARB admitted that the especially for low income people, that there was a serious challenge there to make it fair for them, because as we know, fees like this or increased taxes in certain circumstances can be regressive, and they're the ones who take it in the face first.
Well, so first of all, everyone will pay. I don't care if you somehow say we're cutting them out, you don't have to pay when you're in your car. Goods and services will always cost more. There's no way to insulate our lower income. And I have a fair amount of lower income in my community. I also have people that make a lot of money in like San Alejo and all of that. But there are a lot of people in the middle that are really at, and I think that campaigning, by the way, is one of the best ways you could really get a sense of what's going on in your community. Time and time again, one day, literally every single person that I spoke to said, the food prices are killing me. I'm paying double what I paid a year ago. I can't afford to drive where I need to go. I can't afford to the gas is so expensive. It's literally everything, though. But again, the regressive taxes, whether you call it a fee or whatever, it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, it does hurt your low income. And I think it hurts the opportunity potential as well. Because when you look at, okay, I don't want anyone to ever look at a job and say, gee, I can't afford that because it's too expensive to get there.
Right.
Or, oh, I can't take a risk because I'm not sure what's going to happen to my mobility options. I don't think those are things that people should be worrying about. I think what they need to worry about, is it going to be a good fit for me? Is it going to be a good fit for my family? Not whether they can actually get there or not. And I think, I have my podcast. I love to have people try new things, new opportunities, find careers that they're actually going to be happy at. I don't think you can do that if you're worried about, are you actually going to be able to get to your job because you've got a mobility option, or you're going to be taxed to death, driving there to pay for someone to drive on a train or whatnot.
Sure.
And again, I don't have a problem with public transit. I do believe that some people do rely on it. I just think it needs to be balanced. And if you are putting so much money and so much effort, the discussion of how many people actually ride public transit currently, it ranges anywhere from 94 to 96% of the people drive cars. So it's a very low
Sure.
amount.
Yes.
And what they're talking about is this actual project, this whole program, to maybe cover 10 to 12% of the county. Come on, that's a lot of money to be paying to not help that many people. And I really don't want, like I said, I don't want transportation to be a reason that people don't, mobilize to get a better job and to grow in their careers. I don't want that to be a reason.
Terry, your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I'll pick up on what you just said. Mobilizing to get a better job, lead a better life. That includes education. It also includes recreation.
Sure.
And our region has these hubs. San Marcos with Cal State is a really good example. 40,000 people in and out every day. UCSD, same thing. And they're not taking the trolley to do it. Del Mar, we have 3 million visitors to the beach each year. That is a lot of cars full of families driving
Right.
from all over to get to Del Mar. And we absorb it. It's vehicle traffic. The fairgrounds has 2,500 jobs, fully half of the jobs attributed to Del Mar that led to our housing assignment, which is ridiculous. But
I
We'll
didn't
get there
agree
in a
with
minute.
that, just so you know.
Exactly.
We'll get there in a minute.
We'll go there. But what does that mean? Think about the fairgrounds as a microcosm of ridiculousness. So there is a new platform being planned for the coaster train so that people can ride the coaster. From where? Oceanside to Carlsbad to Solana Beach to Del Mar, City of San Diego to Del Mar to go to the fair. Who comes to the fair? Everybody from all over.
We come from San Marcos. Just so you know.
Exactly. So where do we really need to be putting our thinking? we need to think about those vehicles. So the question is really about lower income. Believe it or not, Del Mar is 25% very low income.
Wow.
We are skewed as can be.
Same.
The upper 25% includes Bill Gates.
Right.
So that's the reality in Del Mar. In my own little block, we've got low rent housing, highly affordable housing. We've got medium housing homes, and we have bluff top mansions, all right next to each other. This creates all sorts of interesting class friction right on one little alley. And so I see it. I actually live it every day. What does this mean? It means that people who don't have access to what others have, that you may consider kind of minimal for good quality of life that everyone else seems to have, you want it. And you deserve it. So what does that mean? That translates into affordable vehicles. Affordable vehicles that are electric. That means being able to charge those vehicles. That's what we need to be thinking about.
Gotcha. So another component of this very complex and interesting plan is a lot of talk around emissions reductions. However, CARB has come out, and this really shook me, and my jaw was on the floor when I was talking with CARB about it, is that electric vehicles, their emission reductions do not apply or will not be calculated to any regional transportation plan. I don't know what we're doing here then, in some respects, because that would be, in SANDAG's plan, the estimate is between 700,000 to 777,000 EVs adopted by 2030, I believe, or 2035, which would be a huge reduction in your overall emissions, and you meet those goals, that 19%, within years. All the major auto companies are scaling up. They've invested hundreds of billions of dollars in the EV sector. So, and this stems from a bill, Senate Bill 375 or 357, back in 2008, by the current Sacramento mayor for vehicles miles traveled and the reduction. And so that hasn't been a secret, I guess, to those in the know, but maybe to the general populace that don't really pay attention to what's going on in the state, it is. So with that in mind, it just seems like it's just a plan or way to get people out of cars instead of really tackling emissions problems, which to me would seem to be the bigger issue for folks who are worried about climate change, sea level rise, especially if you live on the coast like Del Mar. Mm-hmm. So Terry, let's start with you. I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on that. And I mean, there's nothing really you guys, I guess, can do about it, but just your thoughts on this kind of interesting dynamic of what can be counted in the plan and what can't. And then also, if you could just include what are some of the things that a city would be able to do to further reduce their emission footprint?
Yeah. So I'll give you two examples. The first example is vehicle miles travel. If you're in a congested area and you're going slowly, you're traveling more slowly. In some ways, it ought to be vehicle hours traveled. So not miles traveled, but how much is that vehicle on and producing emissions?
Right.
The second one is the emissions. If you have an electric car, your emissions are nothing. And I want to throw a new ball into the game here.
Okay, let's do it.
The Scripps Institution of Oceanography, which is my home department at UCSD, is pioneering a new hydrogen fuel-celled coastal ship. 75% of that ship's miles traveled are going to be hydrogen fuel-celled. Hydrogen fuel made from renewable energy sources, solar paneled on shore. Okay. If we can do that on a ship, we can do that on land. You can't power a ship off solar cells directly. You just can't.
Right.
But what do? You build up the solar. You have lots and lots of panels. You fuel the hydrogen fuel. You get it in a place. Yes, there's some lossiness from solar to hydrogen, but you can store in the hydrogen fuel. So the North County Transit District is looking toward hydrogen-fueled buses.
Okay.
They need to be renewably sourced hydrogen fuel for those buses, but we can get there. I really think we need to be looking at a combination of electric and hydrogen fuel. There's a lot to be done still for the technology to work well, but it's happening. It's happening at the universities. It's happening at Cal State San Marcos. It's happening at UCSD. Let's look at our thought leaders and let's learn from them.
And Rebecca?
Well, that's an excellent point, and I agree with you. And I've said that a couple of times. The future, we need to see what that future technology is. To build a bunch of fixed rail, back to my point. It's like paying for more dinosaurs. Like, I don't think it makes sense. But let me talk about one thing. That's a point that you made, Steve, and that is legislation. Well-intentioned legislation that at the end of the day is terrible, because I've even said, hey, what if every single person in my city actually moved to an electric vehicle? I had no more gas vehicles. It counts toward the state reduction, not the actual regional transportation
Which
plan.
makes no sense to
sense.
the regular person.
And this is where, we've got, again, well-intentioned legislation that truly needs to be looked at. And you know what? I think that a lot of legislators have a problem saying, guess what? I was wrong. Mm-hmm. And you know what? We need to be more human. And being wrong is okay.
Sure.
And you need to own it. You need to take it and say, you know what? We were all off on this. We need to make some changes to the legislation because of this reason. Because you're right, it doesn't make any sense. How is it that you can make all of these changes, get rid of your emissions, because we're saying that they don't have any emissions? How is it that you are not making a dent in all of it? It is ridiculous.
Yeah, and I'll jump in just to say, off your point, and both your point really, the state's going to take credit, but then your cities and counties can't. So how do you, like...
I think it is about control, Steve. It really is.
And
I think
it's possible.
There's no other way to look at it except for its control. Because the state, really...
if you're the state, how can you justifiably sit there and say, oh, we've reduced our emissions by, let's say, 60%, but then all your cities have never even come close to hitting that mark, and the totals don't equal out. So if you're interested in math at all, it just, your brain just explodes at the logic behind what they're kind of doing. And I think you both are right in saying, the legislative or, trying to do something good and then having to go back and saying, okay, this isn't where it's going. And I just wanted to get on this point because you both have touched on it versus technology and what the academics is doing. It seems like a lot of times, especially at the higher levels, the state, not really looking at what industry is doing or academics is doing as far as pushing these new technologies and sources of whether it's transportation or fuel storage or what have you, and then trying to incorporate that into legislation instead of just these kind of old ways of doing things. I don't know, your thoughts.
Yeah, well-intentioned but off target is really an important thing to remember. When you're off target, you need to aim again and do it again. And what that requires is checks and balances and metrics, ways to ask, is this intention being achieved? And if it's not, you go back and you plan again. And that just is not happening with so much of the legislation that's around transportation and around housing. A great example with the housing, very specific. SB 9, an R1 lot gets split in two and you can have 4 houses. That's great if the lot is large and the infrastructure can handle it.
Sure.
If the infrastructure can't, we're in big trouble. And that's local control.
Well, yeah, exactly. But one thing I'd like to add to that is that no fees for sewer, no fees for water, no fees for schools.
So no parking requirements.
That's exactly right. So you're literally going in and changing neighborhoods. I'm adamantly opposed to, I talk about this all the time. The state, in their infinite wisdom, and I say that with a proper amount of sarcasm, they don't know what's best for cities. And we really do need to bring that local control back to cities. We need to figure out how we grow, how our community wants to grow, because there is an expectation. You buy in a single-family residential neighborhood. You don't want a small apartment building next to you.
That's right.
That's not what you bought. But that's what's happening with SB 9. And that's what the future, as the state continues to grab the, all of the control away from local governments, we're not as effective as we can be and we should be. And our communities are being hurt by their legislation.
And here's the punchline. SB 9 can 4-fold increase density in a residential single-family home neighborhood. None of those are required to be in the affordable range.
Oh, wow.
And yet SB 9 purports in its legislation to be about creating affordable housing.
That's what it was sold
The
on.
intention is there, and it fails to meet that target in the black and white of the text of the legislation.
Right. And to your point, with these ADUs under SB 9, the assumption is there'll be smaller units, 800 square feet. Oh, yeah, you can. I mean, we've literally seen 800 square foot places in North County or in San Diego County go for $2,000 a month. And that's not an affordable option for many people. And to dovetail off of that a little bit, I wanted to get your take on this as well. We talked about it. I wrote a story on it with the housing component of SANDAG's plan, and there's this dichotomy of what's going on with the board and SANDAG having to approve housing elements from cities. Yours is under consideration right now. Other cities went with consultants to do that and skip SANDAG. So
I'll just correct there.
Okay.
So SANDAG doesn't approve the housing element, but they do. No, CARB oversees
HCD,
SANDAG, but the HCD, Housing and Community Development at the
Sorry.
Sacramento state level. However, what SANDAG does is helps. They supplement data. That's where the consultants come in, for example, for Carlsbad. But SANDAG tells us what we need to achieve. We have to put the housing element together to achieve it. And then HCD says, no, you're not there yet. Go back to the drawing board.
So you guys are in kind of a limbo. San Marcos is okay.
Well, yes, except the thing that I would like to mention is also with the now the change with the road user charge. It actually now the numbers are a little bit in flux there too. So when we need to have decisions made, that does it fit in the actual county plan with VMTs, it actually puts a little bit of a monkey wrench in everything. It's very complicated. And again, I think that, SANDAG has gotten off of their mission. I think the mission has always been transportation. And now they're talking about RENA allocations. And, and I feel terrible. I voted against the regional housing needs assessment numbers. I personally don't want any mandates from the state coming down. There was some discussion early on. It's almost 172,000 housing units from 2021 through 2029, I think it was. Yes. And if you look at that number, it's huge. We know we are not going to be able to build that many housing units. And to be honest, should we? Should we? Again, back to, and then SB 9 doesn't even count toward that, or your ADUs. And so you're
they don't count toward the RENA.
No. And so you're looking at this whole, we're going to force you to do this. We're going to force you to do that. And I'm talking about the state. And then we're left with the aftermath and trying to explain to our citizens, we don't have control over that.
Sure.
We do have control over this. And it's very confusing, and we're in the know, and it's confusing to us. So think about regular, everyday residents that just literally want to live their lives. Like I mentioned earlier, they want to have a good quality of life. You're telling them that, sorry, you're going to get all of this housing, whether you want it or not, because someone else needs to come here. Yeah. People
Terry,
are fed up.
I just wanted to give you a minute on Del Mar's position, because there's a development there, and then this, the housing component, where you guys are, don't have a certified housing element yet. But at the same time, there is this push from SANDAG and,
comes from the state, but yeah.
Sure, and the state, more dense projects, higher projects, big apartment buildings, all this stuff. That may work in San Diego. Other areas, don't want that. And I think just from my 7 years at Coast News, it's been very clear that residents across the political spectrum agree on one thing. We don't want these high rises. They just don't. Very dense projects. So I just want to get your take on it from Del Mar's perspective with where you guys are at and then how you look at that as well.
So I'm going to throw a little bit of math into the aftermath.
Go, girl.
So when the RENA allocation was voted on at SANDAG, the majority of the board members voted no. And then a weighted vote was called, and San Diego City, together with a few other jurisdictions, overrode the majority. Where was it unfair? It was actually unfair from the tiniest city to the largest city. here's the math. If you do a little scatter plot and you plot size of the city on one axis, allocation of RENA numbers on the other axis, and you fit a line to that, you can calculate bias. And the smaller the city, including National City was actually the most biased against, and they're the sixth. They're not the 5 small cities, they're number 6 smallest.
Okay.
And from there, it went the other direction. So the larger you are, the more biased it was in under allocating units to you. So there was this enormous flux in how balance could have been achieved and was not achieved. People saw it and they voted no, and then the weighted vote overrode that. Del Mar had no say. Del Mar has 1 vote out of 100 in the weighted vote, and it was done to us.
Right. Another thing, obviously, we've been talking about a little bit is that has been a part of this conversation for years is transit frequency. Everybody says you got to invest in more trains, more buses, this, that, and the other. Well, the buses aren't being rode or ridden, whatever, and people aren't using them. Especially in North County, I almost never see anybody on a bus. But there are those routes that are popular. So would it make more sense in this regard to reduce those routes that aren't being used right now and just doubling up on those popular ones, getting that revenue? You know, you can scale back on some of your subsidies to that. And I guess another part of the 2-part question is, does this plan even increase frequency? I mean, does it look or appear that it would make a difference to get to that 10%, 12% ridership goal of SANDAG?
Well, you know, the bus network is actually one of my favorite things that I really want to see increase and expand, including places where people can go to get on the bus easily and ways for people to call on demand a small vehicle that will take them to the next bus. The 101 bus is highly used. It's slow. So we need a 101 Express. We don't have east-west buses that go to the schools to get the kids to schools. We need those. We have a complete disconnect between MTS in the South County and NCTD's system, the Breeze, in the North County. Del Mar is where they come together and collide, and we have a deficit of buses. So our bus system is very messed up. It needs to be rethought, and I really like your idea of let's put more buses where they're used. Let's let ridership push frequency,
right,
and let that be a positive feedback loop that might actually guide how our system is laid out. We need to do this better.
Rebecca, your thoughts?
Well, back to I said it before, fixed rail, it just doesn't really serve most people. And, you know, I mentioned it earlier, microtransit and then also other smaller ways to get around are going to be the future. That is going to be getting your kids to, for instance, their after-school curriculars, places like that. I mean, I had a daughter who played club soccer, so I literally had to go to soccer practice 3 times a week, and then on the weekends, always games, and sometimes there were multiple games, had to get kind of all over the place. And then my son, surfer. So he liked to go out to the beach, and we love Del Mar. You know, San Diego native, I love it. But, you know, if you look around at what we are spending the predominant amount of money, it's not on the things that are really moving people where they need to go. And, you know, again, I think probably the best, so like the Carlsbad connector, let's talk about that for a minute. Mm-hmm. You know, when you're talking about microtransit, that is how you're going to get people, for instance, they need to get to the Sprinter. By the way, the Sprinter's
successful.
Has hardly any parking lots.
Right.
So we built these transportation, supposed to be a hub to get on the actual Sprinter, but there's no place to park. And so, I mean, a lot of the things that we've done have been very nonsensical because, you know, back to the whole, oh, it seems like a good idea. Well, what about that part of the idea? They're not well thought through. And so if you think about microtransit, you think about on demand. And I really think that is going to be the future technology that's really going to save us.
But don't we already have that with rideshare?
Well, yes. And that's
there.
going to be part of it. That's going to be part of it. Like, for instance, I'm never going to ride in an autonomous vehicle with a person that I don't know with no driver. I'm sorry, it's never happening. I've told my 22-year-old daughter, no way in hell are you doing that. Yes, I said hell. No way, it's not happening. You need to be, and that's what we need to be more innovative about. You know, you brought up innovation. It's not just private. It's all of us really coming together. It's academia. It's private business, and it's also government. Just because we're a government doesn't mean that we should not be innovative. We should actually be more innovative because we're spending taxpayer dollars. It's money that everyone is investing in. So really investing in things that are going to help all of us is how we have to look at this. So investing in the microtransit, the on-demand, getting you where you need to go, whether it's by an autonomous vehicle, because I do believe that is the future, or it's, like on a small bus, getting the kids to school. Most districts don't have school buses. I know ours doesn't. That's one of the things that I have actually been really hammering on. And North County Transit, and you're going to love this, North County Transit actually is ready to move forward with our shuttle program.
Okay.
However, they don't have enough people actually working for them.
Right.
So you've got so many, and that's another part of public transit that really needs to be looked at. When we're talking about, we've done all these things like, let's just, the Ubers and this and that, making it tougher for people to actually work has been a problem, in my opinion. We've got all this, pushed that we need labor unions. We need this, we need that. Do we need it on everything? I know it's probably not a very popular thing. My idea is be as competitive as possible. If you're a union, great. But guess what? People need to work. They need to be back to work. 50 people they're short at North County Transit was the last number I heard. So there are many of the regular routes that are now not even actually happening. So in order for us to be able to move forward with some of this technology and these ways that we're going to actually get people around and move them in a manner that they need to go, is going to rely on transportation and the employees that are going to run this transportation.
Right.
So, these are issues that are not well thought through, like I mentioned. And, we really need to take a look at them again and say, how can we change things?
So one of the last issues, we'll wrap it up with this one, and you both have touched on a little bit, is the Central Mobility Hub. Oh. So for those who don't know, it's this grandiose plan of San Diego's Central Station, or whatever they were calling it, like in New York, Grand Central Station. And it's come under fire. There's a lot of controversy around it because of the Ash Street scandal, Civic Center Plaza down in San Diego. There's criminal investigations going on, massive debt owed on those buildings. And now it looks like some on the board, present company excluded, want to absorb that and buy that from the city of San Diego. And it's about 8-9 blocks off of where any rail line and metro line or trolley line converge. So you have Santa Fe, where you have the coaster goes down there, Amtrak goes down there, you have MTS right there, and you can, it seems like the natural fit, or maybe even Old Town. Just your thoughts on the Central Mobility Hub. Does it make sense, or is it something that could just be at Santa Fe, and you can build off from there, and then get your airport connection from Santa Fe, or even Old Town, if that's where it may end up going. But it seems like they're, at least staff and a couple board members have been pushing this Central Mobility Hub to the Ash Street building, and all the drama surrounding that.
I'm going to say off the bat, the Central Mobility Hub is illogical. It does not make sense. If you are most everyone in San Diego County, it makes no sense for you. What makes sense? Being able to be dropped off somewhere near the airport so that you can get quickly to a terminal. Something on the airport grounds makes sense. We've got the Old Town bus shuttle that gets to the airport. That makes sense. A Central Mobility Hub where you have to go all the way downtown into San Diego. And if I had to go to San Marcos via the Central Mobility Hub, it makes no sense. A wheel and spoke approach doesn't work in San Diego County. There are more places that I want to go that are not downtown than places I want to go that are downtown. And I'm not alone.
Totally agree. And I do believe that the Central Mobility Hub is a way for San Diego to get their unfair share of all the dollars And now that it's, somehow all of a sudden, it's right next to a 101 Ash, and it actually includes that. It's no mistake. And I think, again, San Diego needs us to bail them out. I don't think all the county taxpayers deserve or should have to come in behind their bad decisions and save them. I certainly don't expect the residents of the county to come in if I make a bad decision financially. I think San Diego needs to own it. I think San Diego needs to deal with it themselves. I'm not there to, represent San Marcos and say, yes, I'm going to go right along with this. And we're going to tax you, San Marcos residents and Del Mar residents and all of the residents that are not in San Diego proper, to pay for something as extravagant that doesn't honestly make sense. And I mean, I'm sure you've actually run the numbers. I haven't even run the numbers, and I know. I mean, I've literally lived in San Diego. I grew up in East County. I know that it doesn't work. You can't get all the way just to downtown and then somehow get where you need to go. It really is easier just to get dropped off, do a quick little move you around the airport sort of situation. But to actually have a mobility hub in downtown San Diego doesn't make any sense. And yes, take what we already have, a stop that we already have, and improve it and make something happen there. But to go off the beaten track to try to save any city out of their bad financial decisions, I'm a hard no on that one.
Well, great. Well, thank you both for coming. I just wanted to say that I enjoy covering you both very much for the Coast News, and I appreciate you guys always picking up the phone, willing to explain things to me, break down complex issues such as this, or the housing components and stuff like that. So I really appreciate you guys taking the time to come out today. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Stay Classy San Diego. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Max Lux Media, Barn Time, and thank you again for watching Stay Classy San Diego.